Got it. There you go. So, as I said, my name is Dave Baxter. I'm a teacher at Montgomery College. I am also a user of Etsy. I've been using Etsy since 2012. Typically, I would be doing art shows and festivals, and then we had this weird thing called the pandemic happen, and I came back to Etsy in a big way. Um, I primarily work with fused and stained glass, and that's what I sell. Um, and just a couple of mechanical things. If you have questions, please put them in chat. We will try to get to them as we can. Um, we've allotted an hour of time for this, but I will take as many questions as we have time for. Hopefully, we have a little extra time. We can do that too. So put them in the chat if you can. That really helps. Just so you know that when I'm doing my presentation, I'll have a PowerPoint opened. I won't be able to really see chat very well. So just don't expect an immediate answer. If I see it, I will try to respond to it if I can, but I may not see it. Okay, so what am we do today? First of all, I'm going to talk about what Etsy is. Then I'm going to talk about how Etsy has grown over the years. Then I'll talk about what can be sold, what can't be sold, some ideas about how to get started, and the advantages and disadvantages of Etsy, some of the costs involved, and then I'll have some recommendations and final thoughts. And then, of course, after all that, we'll take whatever questions we got time for. All right, so let me share my screen here. So this is an introduction to Etsy for the Art League of Ocean City, and I am your instructor, Dave Baxter. So first of all, the question is, what is Etsy? Etsy is what's called an e-commerce platform, and it began running in 2005. So if you think about it, that's not very long for anything to be out there as far as platforms go, because a lot of stuff's been around for a while on the internet. So it's pretty cool that it's out there and it's grown this much. Um, it is geared towards individual artists and makers as sellers. So hopefully folks like yourselves or myself, individuals as opposed to companies. It's not meant to be a place for people like Amazon to sell stuff. It's meant for as a place for folks like you and me to sell. It focuses on handmade, vintage, and crafts, and I'll describe what those are in a minute. But that's what its focus is. And in some ways, it's designed to compete with bigger sites like Amazon and eBay. And it's a different kind of focus, obviously, than Amazon or eBay. Amazon is a lot of new stuff, although sometimes you will find artists work on there as well. And also eBay, which of course is a lot of used stuff. So it's sort of like we're sort of in the middle, but we're for people that are artists and makers themselves. As of 2021, Etsy had 96 million active buyers and 7.5 million sellers. So that's quite a lot of folks on the site, and I think quite a lot of sellers too. So it's something to be aware of. So one of the things you might be interested in knowing is how Etsy's grown over time. So this is a graph. It's quarterly users, and this is data reported by the company itself, of course. But you can clearly see when the pandemic hit, right? Because all of a sudden in 1919 or 2019 or 2020, things just went through the roof for Etsy. I think if you look also carefully at the end of that graph, you will see that it's kind of leveled off, maybe come down a little bit. I think some of that has to do with the economy right now and interest rates and all that stuff. But clearly, there's quite a few people that use Etsy, so you've got a lot of places or a lot of people to potentially reach as an audience. So what can you sell on Etsy? So you can sell handmade items. Handmade is anything that you physically create. Now, that doesn't mean you can't buy materials and use those materials to make something physical. For example, I buy my glass. I don't manufacture my glass, right? That would drive me nuts. But I am allowed to buy things and make stuff from those things. However, they can't be handmade by somebody else. So I can't have my neighbor over here making, I don't know, wooden sawhorses or whatever and sell them for him because, of course, they're made by somebody else. I'm not allowed to do that. You have to use your own photos, so not stock photos. And in my course, I do talk a lot about how people use photos and how you should use your photos. I use my iPhone for most of my photos. It works relatively well. Um, but and if you want to, you can hire someone to take photos. You just can't use photos that are produced for other purposes. You know, like a service that uses or produces photos of stuff. So you can also sell vintage items. Vintage items have to be at least 20 years old. Typically, newer collectible items are not allowed. So something that might have been collectible when I was a kid is certainly something that would be considered vintage, but something that's collectible, you know, from, I don't know, McDonald's or whatever yesterday is not. However, you may be asked to prove that your items are vintage. And I don't have too much experience, honestly, with the vintage items section of Etsy. I just know that on occasion, if you've got clothing, for example, that you call vintage, you may be asked to show that it is in fact vintage. If you bought something at an estate sale, for example, that may or may not actually be vintage clothing. If you have some labels or some way of showing that, then you're fine. But just know that you can't just sell it just because it came from an estate sale. You can also sell craft items. So craft items include materials, tools, or supplies that could be used to make an item or for an event. Those materials can be handmade, that is something you've made, commercially made, or vintage. So this is sort of the one exception to producing things that are quote handmade. If you go to the Michaels and get a bunch of stuff and make up like a basket of materials for a party, for example, those are all commercially produced items, but you're putting them together into some sort of way that allows you to sell them on Etsy. So like you can make cake decorating supplies, balloons, party supplies, all that kind of stuff. You cannot sell mass-produced clothing or accessories, however. So nothing is mass-produced. You can also sell digital guides, patterns, workbooks, etc. So, for example, if I wanted to, I could make my own stained glass patterns, put them out on Etsy, and people could buy them from me to make their own stained glass panels. I haven't explored that too much. I know there are people that do it, and they do it very successfully. In fact, I just made a purchase on Etsy myself not too long ago of a stained glass pattern for lettering because a project I'm working on for a commission requires certain kinds of lettering, and I was looking for something kind of funky, and this person had what I needed. So what you can't sell, anything that's prohibited, and those things are things like alcohol, tobacco, drugs, drug paraphernalia, and all things like that. Any dangerous items like firearms, hazardous materials, or recalled items. Some of this should seem pretty self-obvious, I would think. Anything that promotes hate or violence. Illegal items, or anything that promotes illegal activity. And items with adult content. Although, to be honest, on this last one, I have seen content that I would consider adult out there. And why that's not caught, I can't really say. Maybe they just haven't been noticed by the people in charge of Etsy yet. But just so you know, those are the things that they say you're not allowed to use. So, what do you need to get started? Perhaps it's obvious, but you should have a computer. A good computer with a fair amount of memory is helpful because you'll be doing a lot of imagery. You'll be taking photos of your stuff. And for each listing on Etsy, you're allowed to have up to 10 items or 10 photos for that item. So, a computer's a good way to do that. There is a phone app out there. I use it a little bit. but I will tell you that it would be really, really hard to run an Etsy store with the phone app. Um, it's such a small platform to look at, and it can be very difficult to get things done that were much more intuitive when you have a computer and a full screen in front of you. So having some inventory on hand is useful. So something you've made ahead of time that you're thinking about selling, because you can create an account at Etsy with being a regular person, like a customer, real easily. But in order to open the shop itself, you're going to have make a listing. That is, you're going to have to make one item as a list or a for sale. So you're going to have at least something that you can show pictures of in order to start as a shop. You can't get through the process from beginning to end of opening the shop without that in hand. Um, Typically, what I have my students do is, and what I do as a demonstration in class is, I make up a fictitious shop name, one that I have no real intention of opening, but that I can, put a picture on of something that is ridiculous and no one's ever going to buy, and I put a huge price on it, right? So it's just to get through the mechanics of this, but you do have to have some sort of thing to open your shop. You will need your bank account information and you have to provide that to Etsy. So some people get a little nervous about this in class. I will say it's probably as safe as anything else is on the internet. I've never had any problems, but you do have to give your bank account information out in order to open a shop. So like you'll need a bank account or a credit card or something like that. It's helpful to be armed with who and what you're competing with. In other words, spend some time looking at what other people sell on Etsy that are things that you might sell. So if you make boxes, go, wood boxes, you might go look in Etsy search engine and say, who else sells boxes and what are they charging? And can I make a profit at that? Spend some time doing that before deciding whether this is the right thing for you to do. Because you may look at that and say, hey, I can't make anything that cheaply. Or you may say, hey, those are way too expensive. I can be less expensive than that. I can do better. Those are the kinds of considerations that you have to think about. I will tell you that personally, one of the problems I have as a stained glass artist is that there are people out there who are hobbyists, who are selling just to get their material costs back. They're not necessarily trying to make a living or a profit at it. And that may be true in many other fields as well. Um, and because they're not actually trying to make money at it, their prices are artificially low, which makes it very hard for me to compete with them. So what are some of the advantages to using Etsy? It doesn't require you to set up your own website, and you get an online presence from that. I can tell you I had Squarespace for a while, and I'm not unfamiliar with using a computer or anything like that, and I've done some web design in the past. But I can tell you that was a whole lot more work than it was to do the store through Etsy. It was also much more expensive. I think last I checked, having an e-commerce platform through Squarespace was about $50 a month. And there's no guarantee that drives any traffic to your own site, right? Whereas Etsy has algorithms in place designed to drive traffic to your particular store. So the cool part is setting up a shop is free and relatively easy. So they don't charge you anything to have stuff or to have a shop. There's no monthly maintenance fee or anything like that. And it's relatively easy to do once you get the hang of it. If each listing only costs 20 cents. So if you think about it, if you're going to go to like an art fair or a craft fair or anything like that, usually there's some sort of fee to get into it. You might even have to be juried. You don't have to take that into consideration when you're using Etsy. And it's only 20 cents to actually put the item up there on the site. Now, of course, if you sell it, that's a different story, but the actual listing fee is just 20 cents, which is really good, kind of a very inexpensive way of advertising your products. Again, you got market penetration there because you have millions of potential customers. you could take off, right? You could become the next sensation. You never know, because there's millions of people out there that are your potential customers. You also have the ability to do your own marketing, so you can cross post on your social media account. You can have an email database that you might keep, things like that. I post a lot on my Instagram. I also post some on Pinterest. So for those of you familiar with those accounts, actually, I should also mention Facebook, of course. For those of you familiar with social media accounts, this is a good way to do your own marketing and drive people to your site. Etsy does try to set itself apart by focusing on custom and unique work. So one of the things that has a real advantage over things like eBay or Amazon is that everything that you sell potentially on Etsy is unique, right? You can't find what I do on Amazon. You can't find what I do on eBay. You may find a little bit of stained glass on eBay, for example, but usually something that's damaged or something that's considered old and maybe need repair, that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily stuff that you would find on Etsy. And the same is probably true for everything you guys would sell. Everything is online. So you don't have to, go to a market or a fair. And if you're a skilled computer user, it's a really good way to get your product sold. And you can run it as a side business. So if you got a regular job, working Monday through Friday or whatever, and you need some extra income, it's a way to produce some extra income. So what are the disadvantages to using Etsy? So the competition is significant. So again, you remember those numbers I gave at the beginning, something like 96 million viewers and 7.5 million creators. That's a lot of people that have to see your stuff, or a lot of people that are having to go through all that content in order to find you as a creator. So it can be pretty hard to be found. And if you take my class, well, of course, we'll talk about some ways that you can get found more easily, but it is, significant. This, I will say that I don't see as much competition lately for myself as I've seen in the past, but it's still out there. So getting noticed can be difficult, and it does require work. You do have to spend some time in front of your computer, really pushing your product. Um, you have to get noticed by the various search algorithms, both in Etsy and outside of Etsy. And doing that takes time and effort. And of course, there are competitive sites, right? To some extent, Amazon and eBay are competitors, but you may see other competitors out there for your particular form of art. And frankly, in-person sales can be a form of competition as well, right? You have to do all of the shipping. So sometimes this can be a big concern for students, um, because it's hard to know how much something's going to cost to ship, right? Shipping's often done by weight. Um, for example, in my case, I have to have an informed decision about how much something's going to weigh and what kind of box it's going to go in, before I talk about shipping for my customers. Um, Etsy often tells me my shipping charges are too high. Well, they're too high for a reason. I have to get the stuff there intact, right? When you're shipping glass, it's real easy for it to break. So often I have to do double boxes and things like that in order to make sure that it gets there in one piece. Excuse me. You do need computer skills. So you need to be comfortable with doing things like manipulating images, loading files up, entering fields, information in fields, and filling out forms. If you're not completely comfortable with that, or you don't think you can learn that, then Etsy may not be a good platform for you to use. So customer service is all electronic. There is no person to actually speak to. So when you have a problem, you send an email. You can't call somebody. You can't chat with somebody. There's no live chat, for example. Um, and just as an aside, I found this out the hard way last Christmas, because Etsy shut my site down. They said that someone had seen suspicious activity on my account, which was about as vague as you can get. And it took me 6 weeks to get that fixed. Um, I can't tell you that it was a particularly good experience. So I don't think that's typical, however. But if you do have a problem, I just want you to know that that's something you need to be aware of. That it's if this kind of thing, especially at Christmas time, you need to get it fixed quickly. It can take a while. Um, and I never did get a good explanation. I don't think that's a typical experience, however, but just something to be aware of. So the costs associated with Etsy. So listing fees are just 20 cents. So every time you put a listing up, it's 20 cents. It's really cheap. If you don't, if you got a $50 item, 20 cents is nothing to list it. I've had art fairs and places that are live that want, hundreds of dollars to come, and you got to get juried in and all of that stuff. So 20 cents is a pretty good deal. However, once you sell the item, selling fees are 6.5%. And that includes any shipping charges, right? So if I charge $10 for shipping on something, that means that 65 cents is going to get added onto that or taken from that as a fee for using the shipping, right? So every time your total amount sold for and your shipping charges basically get added together, and they take 6.5% of that. Sometimes there are additional costs if you have a higher sales volume or you participate in some of the optional programs. There's one called Etsy Plus. I do participate in that. But typically I've only seen fees at around 6.5% because my sales volume isn't sufficiently high to worry about that. You have to pay for the shipping materials, right? So if you're shipping stuff out from your front door or to the post office or whatever, you got to get all that stuff. We like to order from Amazon, frankly, and a lot of that gets reused when I send stuff out the door. It's super helpful for me. So I recycle as much as I can. Sometimes there will be reserves placed on payment to you. So what controls this is a little bit mysterious to me, but I will say that basically they put reserves on folks that might be new. Well, let's say, for example, you open a shop and all of a sudden you got 10,000 items listed on your shop, right? I mean, like literally 10,000. That's probably sending some alarm bells off on the part of Etsy because, of course, an individual creator having 10,000 items ready to go and ready to ship is probably unlikely. So they might be a little concerned about someone like that, and therefore they put a hold on it to make sure that you really ship the stuff out, people really get it, and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty rare, but it can happen. So some recommendations and additional thoughts. First of all, check out your competition, not just on Etsy, but other sites. So go to Google. I'll Google top stained glass sellers like in Maryland or in the US or whatever, or top fused glass sellers. And even I've been known to go, who are the top sellers on Etsy? So if I want to find out what is being sold on Etsy, one of the best way to do that, just go to the internet and check it out. You also might go to craft fairs, for example, if you do that, and see what people that might be selling the same sorts of things you are selling and for how much. Always good to know whatever people are doing. I suggest that you set up a dedicated email for your business purposes. So I have a personal email and a business email, and I keep those as separate as I can. And that way, it's easier for me to say, okay, I'm spending today working on my business. I can look at all that email. I don't have to go and look at my personal email. I don't have to get it too confused. Google will give you a free one for nothing. So, set up a Google one. You also need to spend some time thinking about what you want to call your shop. So you can't just call it anything. There are limits on the characters you can use. For example, they don't let you use the special characters when you name your Etsy shop, like #, things like that. Also, if someone else has that shop name, you are not allowed to use that shop name. Okay. So you can't go and use the same thing as somebody else. And they actually will, when you go to sign up for your shop, there's a place where you'll check to see, you'll enter what you want to call your shop in that field, and it'll tell you if it's available. Typically, most things are available unless you're, I don't know, Glass by Dave, because believe it or not, that's out there. um, so yeah, you also need to spend some time pricing your work and thinking about how it's going to cost, or how you're going to price it to recover your costs and your expenses, right? Um, this is one of the hardest things I think that artists face, because many of us think that our efforts don't count, our hourly efforts don't matter in terms of price. Um, but I can tell you that the way you make sure that it does is, think about it seriously. Like I said, there are folks out there that are hobbyists in the glass field, and they're not thinking about how long it takes them to make something. They just made it. They want to get rid of it. They don't care what it really costs them in terms of time and or materials. They're just trying to recover some of their money. Practice your photography. I recommend that you show your photographs to some of your friends and family. Um, I can tell you with some degree of honesty that friends and family can be brutally honest about the quality of your work as far as photography goes, right? And that's what you want, right? You want someone who's going to tell you, hey, that doesn't look great, or hey, that looks really good. Um, and you'll get both sides of that from your friends and family. So practice some of that. Again, like I said, I take almost all of my photographs with the iPhone. The iPhone does a pretty good job with glass. I can tell you that I also have a Canon camera, and taking pictures of glass with that is a big setup. It takes a lot more work, and it doesn't really produce results that are necessarily any better. Ask your friends and family to favorite your shop. So once you got it set up and you're out there, you're ready to sell, tell your friends and family, hey, I got this shop. Please, if you don't want to buy anything, at least go and favorite it for me. That'll really help me out. So the more people that favorite your shop, or like your shop is what I would really refer to it, but they call it favorites. Um, the more people who do that, the more likely you are to get noticed. And the more likely you are to get noticed, the more likely you are to sell something, right? It pushes you up in the search algorithms for every platform out there. You might want to investigate advertising options, particularly on social media. So every once in a while, I will actually spend a little bit of funds and advertise either through Instagram or through Pinterest or one of those platforms, so that I'm pushing that particular product a little further up the algorithms. And it's more likely to get noticed, and they're more likely to sell. And finally, Etsy's not for everybody. So, like I said, if you're not good with a computer, or you think you're not going to be good with it, then Etsy might not be good for you. Or you may say, hey, there's plenty of people selling stuff out there that are exactly what I'm selling, and they're selling for nothing, and I can't make I can't make a living doing that. So it may not be for everybody. I have had occasionally students say, hey, I got all this junk in my garage. Can I sell it on Etsy? And the answer is, well, no. You can't, right? That's an eBay platform kind of thing. It's not an Etsy platform. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with the slides. I will take a second here, and I will show you my shop real quick, just so you can see what one looks like. So give me a second to set that up. Okay, so this is me, and I just want to put a few point out a few features here. So this is the name of my shop, glassbydave.com. So one of the things you can't do is spaces, right? So in order to make it as close to most of my email addresses that I have, I've used that. People that come in can hit follow shop, and that's the thing that I'm suggesting you do with your friends and family. There's ways to contact me. These are all the kind of icons you're going to have to set up. You'll have a picture here you could put in, a picture there. You'll have a banner, and here's the listings. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. And these are categories that I've set up, and these are the sales I've had and how many people I've had as people that have liked me, right? So I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on that, but just to show you what one looks like. You've probably seen it, but I want you to see mine too. Okay, so that's most of the material I have. Like I said, the class is normally 5 weeks long, and there's a lot more that we could talk about, but I do want to give you guys some time to ask questions. So let me take a look at the chat and see if there's anything in there. Okay, let's see. So Cindy asked about advertising schemes. So Cindy, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean on that? Just a little bit more? Are you able to?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, when I created my shop, and I'm trying to figure out how to get some more traction. I'm looking at advertising on Pinterest and some of the other things she talked about. But when I looked at how they have internal, they being Etsy has internal advertising, and they also have external advertising. In the internal advertising, what I read is that you have to bid an amount, like a minimum and maximum that you're willing to spend. And then it's charged on every time somebody clicks on your image or one of your postings, I guess, you get charged that amount of money. And it said that the minimum was $1. Well, my business is handcrafted greeting cards. So if 5 people click on it, that exceeds what I'm charging for card. And so it seems to me like advertising internally to Etsy is a non-starter for me. So that's what I was curious if you had any thoughts about that.
So the dollar charge you're talking about is correct. It is a minimum amount. However, it's not based on the number of clicks. Okay, it's based on how much you're willing to spend per day. All right. So if 15 people click on that, you're still charged the dollar. Now, where it becomes different is if it's an ad that Etsy has put out on your behalf, then they charge you a higher percentage rate of the sale. I think it's 11.5%. Okay. So in other words, if let's say Etsy puts an ad out on a Google platform somewhere or some social media platform on your behalf, and someone clicks on that and that click leads to a sale, then they charge you more. Okay.
Okay.
So it's not quite just number of clicks. It does get you more visitors, which can be helpful. And as far as the other side of that equation, you're looking at things you might do yourself through social media, for example.
Right.
So that can be costly, or it can be cost nothing, right? So it costs me nothing to put stuff on Instagram. It costs me nothing to put stuff on Facebook, at least at this point. So those are 2 ways that you can have people brought to your shop.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Let me just follow. So let's say I have 20 cards on my shop, and people come in and look around, and they look at, this card, a couple of people look at, another card, a few people look at. If I say I'm willing to spend $1 a day, they will charge me $1 a day for all those people looking at my site.
No, they will charge you $1 a day.
Whether they
That's
look
all.
at my site or not.
Right. The difference happens in how they get to your site. So again, if it's an external ad put out by Etsy, they will charge a higher percentage of an actual sale. So the fee only goes up if that external ad is actually a sale.
Okay. If nobody comes to my site during that day, do I get charged $1 anyway?
Yes, you do.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
You've clarified that a lot. Thank you.
Sure. And Mary Ellen asked about taxes and reporting them. That's a good question, Mary Ellen. I probably should have put it into this, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Sales taxes are handled by Etsy, okay, for the most part. There's like 2 or 3 states where apparently there's no clear way to do it that they don't, and I don't know what those states are, but there's nothing in this area, for example, and I've never had it happen. But Sales taxes are handled by Etsy. Other taxes are just like any other source of income for you, right? This is business income, and you pay taxes on that income, just like you would any other sort of income. Although, if it's an actual business, it's of course it's a little bit different. Does that answer your question, Mariella? Well, hopefully so. Um, and Diamond Heart asked about returns and refunds. So I have issued a refund to someone who got a broken product from me, which was the fault of the post office. Um, and they were really good about it because they were also a friend. I don't personally accept refunds or returns. That's a choice you have to make. Um, the reason I don't is that, I mean, I shouldn't say I wouldn't take something back. If someone got it and really hated it and they're willing to ship it back to me, I'll probably give them at least a partial refund. But they're going to lose their fee for, you know, what it costs me to do business with them, right? Like the postage and all that kind of thing. Um, if you establish yourself as a reputable person and you have good reviews on your site, you should rarely have a refund or a return. I won't say it can never happen, but I treat it like anything else when you're dealing with a customer, right? You got to decide, is it worth damaging your reputation to not take something back because they're unhappy or they might give you a bad review? That's something you have to decide for yourself. Again, I haven't had that as a problem. And does that answer your question, Time and Heart? Great, thank you. I can see you at least. There's so many people on the screen, I don't know what to do. Julie asks about paying for ads, and she says, "But other than 2 sales, I can't seem to get more sales or any reviews. Any advice?"
And I should expand on that. So when I was paying for the ads, I was getting lots and lots of views, but nobody bought. And I even offered incentives. And I have a Facebook and Instagram page, and I link my Etsy page to that, and I show pictures all the time. I do crochet amigurumi, and it's obviously hard to show texture through pictures. I know my pictures can be improved, but I'm just not even getting a single review. So like, I need to just get over the hump where people even where my shop's even visible at all.
Yeah, so that sounds like the real issue is the visibility of your shop,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's probably not um, the product or the ads themselves. The ads drive people to your shop. They help a lot. How many products do you have up right now? Do you know?
I only have 2 up right now because it was costing so much for the listing fees and I wasn't making any money. But over the holiday season, I had all sorts of like holiday themed things up. So I had like 12.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have like hundreds of different things.
Sure. Well, it actually sounds like you're doing everything you need to do. I will say that it can be really, really hard to get noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having more sales helps. So if have you had 2 total sales total?
2 total sales, and that was as a result of the ads. And neither of those people wrote reviews, even though I asked very nicely in my package and my emails.
Sure. Yeah, people don't like to write reviews either.
So I purchase on Etsy all the time, and I always write a review. That's because I
Well,
know what it's like for the seller.
yeah, exactly. I would say that you're doing everything you need to do, but you're at that point where you're kind of just starting out. So, I mean, I've been at this since 2012, and I have 65 sales on Etsy, right? That's not a lot.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it wasn't supposed to be my primary source of selling till the pandemic hit, right?
Yeah.
Then everyone had to go to some sort of virtual platform. So it sounds like you're doing everything correctly. I would suggest maybe not doing the cost of the ads for a
Oh, I
while.
stopped. I stopped in January because I wasn't seeing a result.
Yeah.
So now I get like 3 views a day because I have no ads.
That's not that bad. Let me see how many I get. I mean, because seriously,
Okay. Nobody does anything. They just look at it. But I only have 2 listings up right now.
The
Well, and
more
that,
listings you have, the more
yeah,
hits you get.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I know
exactly.
that sounds hard, even if there's small differences between them.
Listings are so much work though, because you have to put what the measurements are and
Right.
the weight and everything,
Yeah.
and my
Yep.
pictures suck.
Well, so work on your pictures. Let's start with that. One of the things I suggest to a lot of students is do some close-up pictures.
Yeah.
Also do context pictures. So, in other words, if it's something that's supposed to be in a certain environment, like like paintings put up on a wall kind of thing, take your picture of it actually up on the wall. That sort of thing. Provide some context. Sometimes people will put coins in there to show size, to indicate
Okay,
scale.
that's a good idea.
Maybe something pretty, not a coin, would be a better idea. But you know what I'm saying. Not too
Yeah.
pretty though. Not too pretty, because the last thing you want to do is have it so pretty that they want the item and not the thing you're trying to sell.
You can do
Okay.
videos though too. The video.
I thought about doing videos because I know those draw a crowd, but like my
Yeah, they
video would
do.
be of me crocheting, or like, this is like an octopus I'm making, like, I don't know, put it on my head.
Well, no, we actually make a video of the octopus sitting on something, a white bedspread, and go around the side of it and underneath it.
Oh,
You
I see what you're
look at
saying.
that.
Okay. So I don't have
Yeah.
to like stage
So
anything.
right, it's
No.
not, and it's also not like 20 photographs.
Right. I like
Like
that. I like that a lot.
One
Okay.
of the things
I'm gonna
one
write
of the
that
things
down.
one of the things I do is I take my iPhone and I pan across it from left to right or right to left or whatever
Yeah.
direction makes sense. That's a good way of doing the video. Yeah, videos definitely help. They do show texture.
Okay.
So
Okay.
all I can say is keep at it, Julie, because honestly, it's going to take a while. And that's just being
Yeah.
honest
And
with you.
I do really well at in-person market events. So
Me too.
maybe at least, yeah. And it's because people can touch and like really see the artwork, and maybe just getting my name out locally will build an audience online. I don't
Yeah.
know. I
It's
keep hoping.
it is hard to get really far. I'm just going to be straight up and
Yeah.
honest with you about that. It is difficult. But it's also an additional way to advertise for when you do go to those events, right? So
Yeah.
someone comes along and says, "Oh, I can't get it today." And he goes, "Oh, well, I also have an Etsy shop. Go there," and you give them that address, and then maybe they'll buy later.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
great.
You can do that at your sale events too. Like when you go somewhere and you show and people are handling, have a card out with your Etsy address on it.
I do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I'm not sure anybody's ever like visited it after a show though.
Yeah.
But yes, I've learned from watching other people.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure, of course. And Joseph asks, you get a 1099 starting income. I think $1,200 is the limit. I don't think it's $1,200. I think it's smaller now, and I'm not certain about that because I'm pretty sure I got a 1099 from. I haven't done my taxes yet, obviously, but I'm pretty sure I've got a 1099 from Etsy. I did get a 1099 from eBay because I've been selling a bunch of books and stuff.
I'll just jump in. The law requires a 1099 at $600. I'm also a lawyer. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's 600 now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
it's been for years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking the same, but I wasn't certain. And I do have a little section in my shop or in my class on the law. And I started out by saying, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice because, of course, CYA. And Cynthia asked about when I'm going to be teaching the next course again. You will have to look on Montgomery County's community arts program to be sure. I'm not sure right now. Off the top of my head, to be honest, because I'm away for most of the summer, but it would probably be in the fall sometime. And yes, you definitely can take it via Zoom. In fact, you have to take it via Zoom. So, okay. All right. And Lisa asks, does it charge for and limit the number of videos? It is not charged for videos, and you can only do one per listing.
And they really encourage videos. They
Yeah.
keep on sending things, encourage videos, because there's been so much traffic from them.
Yeah, and definitely do that if you can. I do it myself. Like I said, I just do a pan across whatever it is I'm doing. There are some limitations to what you can do in terms of how many megabytes it is or whatever, but basically you're fine. Okay, so that's all the questions I have right now. I will say, Julie, one of the other things I should mention is you are allowed to do a process video as part of your shop. So
Mm.
you could do, like, one of the things I've got and I show students is a slow motion video of me making some stained glass. So time lapse. So that kind of thing you could add to a portion of your shop if you want to.
Mm.
So yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Can I ask one more? What do you use for background for pictures? I mean, I notice everybody's got their picture just in front of white, but I can't figure out how to make it like actually look good.
I use a number of different things. I have a piece of red oak, look like that's 12 by 12 square. That's just for like small things. One of the problems you have with glass is taking photographs, right? It just because of reflections. So you can also do what I call a drape. So take something that is like in my case, it's going to be kind of big. In your case, it might not need to be so big, but like take a cloth and like hang it up on a window and then drape it down towards the ground. And then like maybe on the windowsill have a little ledge where you can put the item itself.
Mm.
So it becomes a neutral background. I talk about neutral backgrounds a lot. Yeah.
Mm.
And so if white isn't working for you, and it might not if it's crochet, right? Maybe something black, something dark, especially if the crochet is a light color. Sort of flip the color scheme to paste on, what you're doing.
Mm. Mm.
I also have a couple pieces of marble I use sometimes. Although frankly, the marble is a little more impressive than some of the glass is sometimes. So I don't use it a whole lot. But it's a kind of a thing you could do. You could go get like a tile at Home Depot, for example,
Mm.
and that would work. Yeah, I tend to encourage neutral backgrounds, but that's me. And there are programs out there, for example, that let you put paintings in context. So I forget what it's called, but one of my students showed me her picture, and she had her painting put up on a wall with all this context, like in a real room, but it was all virtually done, right?
Mm.
So there was a couch and light and lampshade and all that kind of stuff. So there are programs out there for that. And of course, like everything else in life, it costs money, right? So
Mm.
I don't necessarily suggest doing that unless, of course, you think it's worthwhile. Other questions?
I'll share that I find that dark shows up better on light and light shows up better on dark. And if you use a fabric for a background, that check the glare on it, because that's going to affect your image. And things like velvet backgrounds seem to not glare the same way.
I just put my email address in the chat. So if you all have questions you want to ask later, by all means, send them all to me. Excuse me. I will try to answer them as best I can. But anyone else have questions they'd like to ask? We've got about 10 minutes.
I appreciated what you said about the higher charge when it is a response to an ad. I didn't realize that. And sometimes I'll sell something that will, and I'm like, that seems like a lot, but I guess it's because they advertised it and I don't know it.
Could be. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to keep you all waiting if you don't have questions.
Actually, I just wanted to jump in if you don't mind, Dave.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say.
I was just going to let you say something. Go
Well,
ahead.
thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Dave, for being the first instructor in the Art League of Ocean City's Business of Art series of classes, which is sponsored by the Worcester County Arts Council. And if you are interested, we're also having another class in the series on April 13th, which is Branding and Marketing for Artists with Abby Custis. So thank you again. I hope you all enjoyed. I found it informative again, even though I've already taken the class with you before, Dave.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And again, like I said, my email's in there. Please ask questions if you folks have them after class.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.